The next topic of my talk, and it's about my research into hollows. It's a lot of time with me poking my head inside, or if there's an opportunity, going inside of one. I have studied a lot of different tree-dwelling species, and in particular, I'll focus on this little guy here, the greater glider. Now, I've actually made a little video about the greater glider, so kick back and enjoy.
Across the forests that line the east coast of Australia, a curious and elusive creature of the night calls it home. After sunset, under the cover of night, the greater glider emerges from its hollow. After checking that the coast is clear, it climbs up into the canopy to begin foraging on the leaves of eucalyptus. If threatened by predators, the greater glider will launch itself from the canopy and, using its thin membrane, glide to escape to safety. Unfortunately, this incredible animal is endangered. Deforestation, wildfires, and climate change threaten this species with extinction. My name is Gracanin, and I study this little known animal to help improve our understanding of what they need and how they use their habitat. To do this, our team climbs way up into the canopy so we can better study them close up. Greater gliders especially love old growth trees that are hundreds and hundreds of years old. In these trees, there are lots of naturally formed hollows, providing spaces inside that gliders use as dens.
That footage is a combination of stuff that I've filmed, but also that my colleague did. We will be up till 4 a.m. sometimes filming greater gliders. We're very unhealthy. Unfortunately, as mentioned in the video, there are threats to greater gliders. So the key ones are habitat loss, and that's not just trees that provide them with the foliage, the eucalyptus foliage that they need to eat to survive, but also those important hollows that they use every single day as a place to den inside of. Wildfires are a problem. The 2019-2020 bushfires, there was an estimated 85% population loss of greater gliders across their range, which is horrific. So really, really not good. And fires also can help to accelerate hollow loss. So as much as fires can help create hollows, these catastrophic high severity burns definitely cause hollow and tree collapse. And climate change is a big threat to greater gliders. Fortunately, these guys have a unique physiology in that at anything 20 degrees or above, they start to get heat stressed. So during the day, they're deep inside their hollows where it's nice and cool. It can be up to 20 degrees cooler inside of a hollow compared to the ambient temperature. But at night, where it should be cooler, under the forecast, under climate change, we're going to have more and more warm nights, and that will affect their ability to get enough water, their ability to eat and digest, and that can have a big impact on their distribution and where they can live. Habitat fragmentation, so over time, small isolated populations means that they're getting inbred, they're not getting lots of gene flow, and so they're losing that genetic diversity, which means populations can get so small that they're no longer viable. Competition and predation are threats, so competition with other species can also be a problem, particularly brush-tailed possums. It's also they're quite the most common competitive hollows because they have that overlap in their hollow requirements. And in some cases, powerful owls are known to enter a forest, pretty much eat all the greater gliders and then move on. So there are these hyper-predation events that have occurred in the past as well. And also mild glider sensing can be a problem. They've got such a soft, thin membrane that it's so easy to tear. So if they're gliding and they misjudge and they land on a fence, it's not good for the glider at all. So it's really important to have wildlife-friendly fencing if you can. So just want to talk with you about a few papers that I've published. So this one here is about how on earth do we capture greater gliders to be able to study them? Because normally we can just spotlight for them or put up camera traps, but if we want to get genetic data, we do have to capture the animal. So the thing is, as mentioned before, is that they live way high up in the canopy and they eat eucalyptus leaves. So setting up a trap with peanut butter or a cookie isn't going to work. So the leaves won't work. And I thought about it, I was like, what if I just got some really good juicy leaves? Not a chance. Other methods in the past have tried to use basically a net on the end of a giant pole, but when your trees are 20, 30 metres high, that's never going to work. And then there was an old cowboy method back in the 80s and 90s where researchers would get a professional shooter and they would shoot the branch that the glider is on. The branch would break and that would cause the glider to glide. It would land on the ground and then they could catch the glider that way. I don't like guns, nor would I like to shoot one in the general direction of an endangered species, let alone in a national park. So that was not an option. So we put on our harnesses and we tried a different method, and basically we detect a glider at sunset coming out of its hollow using a torch looking for eye shine. Then we quickly climb up, get into position, and if we're lucky the hollow is big enough we could just scoop them up. Otherwise we would wait for them to come out of the hollow and grab them that way. And then we get down, take our measurements, health and genetics before releasing them back onto the tree. So I've got a nice little video here showing how tree climbing at night at 30 metres to capture this endangered animal. It's just that easy, folks. Another paper I worked on was a study where we looked at the effect of fire severity on greater glider density. And this was done in Monger National Park, which has got quite a big population of greater gliders. So we did our surveys and we compared the effect of fire severity. And very clearly, where the fire severity was really low, there was an increase in the number of gliders detected. And that declined the higher the fire severity got. And one of the reasons for this is that contributed to this pattern is that in the low fire severity areas, there was a higher abundance of hollows compared to moderate and high. But there's also the impact of the fire itself, and that sometimes gliders couldn't flee or escape or find a hollow deep enough inside of the tree to escape the flames. And then also there's the impact that they would have starved after the fires, where it's a full canopy scorch, there's no food. And these guys are quite sensitive. They don't have any fat reserves, so there's no food. They go pretty quickly. Another paper I worked on was with Dr. Monica Niblard, she is here tonight, looking at the conservation genetics of this species across their range on the south coast of New South Wales. So we went out at night to catch greater gliders and get a genetic sample. We did that at 14 locations. And on this map is where the locations are. The red sites are where the sites were burnt, and green they're not burnt. And what we found was across almost all the sites, there was some level of inbreeding or low genetic diversity or low affected population size. So indicators that these populations have been subjected to a lot of population loss, causing these genetic effects. But there was one population up near here in the metropolitan special area that had a massive affected population size of 5,000. So genetically, that 5,000 means that there are 5,000 individuals contributing to the genetic pool. And if you can compare 5,000 with population down here at Dullah, the effective population size was about, I think, it was under 10, it was about 7. So 7 versus 5,000. So these guys are not doing well, functioning extinct at this stage because they're so small and isolated, which is really sad. But this population out here is doing really, really well. It's very large. And it didn't get burned, so that's a bonus. Another bit of research I worked on was looking at the hollow characteristics and what were greater gliders preferentially choosing over as a place to use as a den. And so we did a whole lot, climbed 68 trees, did a whole bunch of measurements, and we found the key results were that they tended to be in large trees, so diameter breast height of 114 centimetres, so over a metre wide tree. They like their hollows nice and high, which is a pain to climb up to 25 metres to reach them. So they really like them nice and high. And their depth. This is at 7 Mile Beach National Park where we did this study, and the trees there are all Pileolaris that they used, and they form these amazing long hollows that are super deep, so up to 5 metres. So an average 2.5 metres deep was the hollow that they like to use. And to visualise, we made this graph showing all the average measurements of these hollows. So they tended to be a dead end spout, 2.5 metres deep, pretty large opening, but that being said they used smaller and larger, but that was the average, and that was their preference. Part of this work, we also put cameras on the hollows to look at behaviour and to see what species were also using the hollows alongside the greater gliders. So I just want to show you a little time lapse of this greater glider and its little baby. And the thing with the young is that the adults, or the mum, will leave their joey behind because they're still too small to be taken out into the big world. The joey spends literally the entire night just looking out, going back inside, looking out, going back inside, looking out. And I have had to go through like over 200,000 images of baby greater gliders just looking around. And I'm like, just stay in your hollow. Now, in this particular hollow, yellowtail black cockatoo also went in to have a look, and the greater gliders were present at this time, so I think they both got a rude shock. To also visualise how different animals will use a single hollow, I've got huntsman spiders in this one here, and some microbats. Now, brushy came along, and then some blue books started to investigate, and if you look back in the corner, one of the pairs is starting to dig to make a nest, so really cool. This hollow in particular was really interesting, so there was this white baby glider that we could easily monitor and identify because it had unique markings, and it also spent its entire childhood peering out of the hollow constantly. And while I was in there, constantly for 6 months straight, all these animals visited. So by the by, this hollow was only this deep. So every animal that goes inside can see that there's a baby greater glider. And the poor glider was subjected to some skinks, horrible huntsmen, then a silver-crested cockatoo, then a kingfisher, and then some pesky lorikeets. And even though they peered inside and saw that there were gliders in there, squished up, they decided to spend the night there. And if you notice the time set, this is the time after sunset that greater gliders will get out of their hollow. So immediately they got kicked out. A lot of competition. And that little baby glider went from me. This is its first time peering out of the hollow, and this was its last time in the hollow. So it grew up quite quickly. Well, I say quickly, pretty long. One other bit of research that I looked at is using nest boxes for greater gliders. So using reverse entry design boxes here, and we installed 30 of them out near Talaganda. We monitored them for a year, and we found 100% of these nest boxes were used by greater gliders. So at some point, every box had a greater glider in them. After 6 months, we did some checks on the boxes and we found 27 individuals across those 30 boxes. So that was really positive. The average time for a glider to inspect this nest box design was 11.5 days. But then there was one glider that was super curious, and I had installed it at 4:30 p.m. and there was already a glider there at 6:40 p.m. So very rapid. There's also another nest box design currently being researched by ANU, which I'm involved with on this project. And this involves creating a nest box that's more suitable because, as I mentioned before, grading gliders are quite heat sensitive. So introducing a layer of insulation is really important, especially under a changing climate. We want these boxes not to cook these animals. So lots of animals using them, but predominantly this design, the research shows that in this pink square here at Talagander, the most common species detected on camera using them. East Gippsland doesn't have a lot of greater gliders. In fact, there we saw 11 individuals in that whole landscape, and in Talagander we saw 250. Two very different landscapes there. Now, this graph looks really intense and confusing, but I'll break it down. So using these nest boxes, we had sites that were controlled, so sites where we monitored for greater glider abundance, population, and sites where we monitored them and we installed nest boxes. So two different types of sites, no nest boxes, with nest boxes. Before the nest boxes were installed in the control areas where there weren't any boxes, there was actually no statistical significance 2 years later. So this here, with the spread of data, it was basically averaging the same after 2 years. But the sites that did have nest boxes, 2 years since the nest boxes got installed, we saw greater glider numbers increase. This was a significant result, and we had doubling almost. So they are using the nest boxes and we are seeing them reproduce in science, a really positive effect there. The really good thing about the thermally designed nest box is that they also have a really small entrance hole, and there's one on display here that you can have a look at the end of today's talks. Is that small entrance hole stops the cheeky brush tail from taking up home and out competing greater gliders. Here we have it just being able to fit in and then just being able to get out, and it doesn't come back after that. The last topic that I want to talk about is how can we restore hollows. I mentioned nest boxes before, but there's also other things we can do. Protecting trees of various species and ages to provide that diversity of hollow types for various species. Allow leaf litter, fallen logs and branches to accumulate on the ground. This provides microhabitat and also traps moisture and nutrients into the soil for trees to grow. Fence off habitat and trees from livestock. So those paddock trees, there's often a few of them and they have hollows. Fence them off so they don't get damaged by the livestock, the trampling and the rubbing and things like that. Classic one, plant native trees. You want to keep all the whole trees, so conserve them, especially also the dead ones too. They also serve a really important purpose. Protecting Gracanin and roadside corridors. Often they have been left to age for a really long time. They often do have a higher density of hollow-bearing trees compared to other environments. And also ensuring trees grow to maturity to replenish hollow-bearing trees that eventually will perish and die off in the future, so making sure that that cycle continues. We can also create artificial hollows, so we can do wooden nest boxes, plastic nest boxes, PVC pipes, 3D printed modular boxes. We can use hollow logs themselves. We can carve hollows into trees with chainsaws, and we can use a tool called the hollow hog to drill and carve holes as well. And you can even use your humble wheelie bin to make a hollow. This is for large cockatoo species up north. Really clever way of creating a massive sized hollow that would otherwise be really difficult to construct traditionally as a box or to carve into a tree. If a tree is big enough to be able to carve something like that into it, probably already has the hollow. But we have to consider all these different ways of replenishing hollows and keep going back to temperature a lot. And it's an important factor. This study here did a really cool comparison of marine plywood nest boxes, your classic nest box, compared to chainsaw carved hollows, natural hollows as a reference point, and then also a hollow log that got converted into a nest box. And they found that when outside temperatures were 37 degrees, so during a heat wave, it got up to 46.6 degrees inside the nest box. You wouldn't want to be inside of there if you're any kind of fluffing that. It's way too hot. But chainsaw hollows were able to keep quite cool. The natural hollow was the coolest one at 28 degrees. So looking at alternatives to nest boxes is really important. We need to test these more because they could be much better and more viable in the long term too. Because there are a lot of challenges with nest boxes. As I mentioned before, that's a tough our nest box, and it is huge. You can pay me enough money to install that into a tree. But I think that one weighs 60 kilos, possibly more. Pests are also a big consideration, so non-target species like minor birds, as well as honeybees too, introduced, can be a problem. And then nutrition too. Depending on the quality nest box, they can fall apart in as little as 5 years. So it's really important to invest in materials to make sure they last as long as possible, and then monitored and cared for and maintained in the long term. But there are some cool and emerging technologies. So this one here is the hollow hog, and it's an improved version of the chainsaw method because before you'd have to cut a huge section of the live part of the tree, or you just make a little hole and you drill directly inside, causing a lot less stress to the tree itself, and they come out looking like this. Oh, and this is just an example little video there showing the tool in action. It's like it's made out of butter. I can confirm it's hard work. But the thing about these is that you can restore, in some landscapes, depending on the site, you can restore 56,000 years worth of hollow formation in less than a month. The inventor of hollow hog has this on his website where he installed hundreds of hollows in less than a month and restored tens of thousands of years worth of hollows, which is really exciting. And that hollow will stay there for the length of the tree's life, which is really good. And it's an interesting way to think about how we manage trees as well, because instead of just cutting off these dead things out here, you could just carve this tissue here, get rid of this dead stuff and just carve into the tree here and just speed up a natural process. So if this was just in the wild, then eventually termites and fungi and fire and all that would take away this dead wood, slowly take out the dead wood inside of here, or we get some arborists up there and they can do it in a couple hours, which is really exciting. Again, instead of chopping a limb here at this point of the tree, you could chop it a little bit further, carve inside and make a hollow. And you can see this is like a natural hollow slowly being formed, but we could speed that up. But the best solution for hollows and conserving them is to restore the cycle. We need to ensure that we stop deforestation, stop logging, stop all these things that are adding up to missing out on 50 to 100 years worth of time. Because without these trees here, those species that need these hollows to reproduce don't have that time. They can't wait around for 50 to 100 years to have their young. Some of them have lifespans of only just a few years, so it's very quick. In some landscapes, when the hollows are removed, hollow-bearing trees are gone, then you have a lag effect over time, leading to local extinctions. So we need to restore all these steps to ensure that we have enough hollows for these species. In summary, we need trees, this is in the urban context, this study here at the bottom. Trees need to remain standing for at least 40% longer. We need to increase the amount of trees going out into the environment by 60%. And we need to speed up those hollows as well by 30%. So as a short-term solution, leading up to hopefully a long-term solution of restoring the hollow cycle is using artificial structures as a temporary mechanism for these animals. Thank you all for listening.